A blind boy meets the most dangerous police dog, and what happens next breaks everyone. In a city where even trained officers fear this animal, a quiet, sightless kid does the impossible. He makes the beast obey. But just as the world gasps in disbelief, something darker begins to stir. Why did the dog attack in the first place? Why does it respond only to the boy's strange clicks? And why does the police chief look terrified every time they're near? As secrets hidden behind badges and locked kennels start to surface, one truth becomes clear. This dangerous dog isn't what it seems. And neither is the force that controls him. When loyalty turns into a weapon, and innocence stands against corruption, one boy's gift might expose everything. But how far will the powerful go to keep the truth buried? And can a blind child and a broken dog survive what's coming next? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as people hurried up and down, their footsteps echoing against the stone. 11-year-old Linus Hale stood quietly beside a concrete pillar, his walking cane tapping gentle rhythms as he waited for his Uncle James to finish parking the truck. The peaceful morning shattered in an instant. "Havoc! Stand down!" A sharp voice cut through the air, followed by the sound of metal snapping and paws thundering against concrete. Screams erupted as people scattered. Through the chaos, Linus heard it clearly, the heavy breathing of a large dog charging straight toward him. But instead of fear, he felt something else. Recognition. The dog's breathing had a pattern, like music with its own beat. James's voice bellowed from somewhere behind him. "Linus! Don't move!" But Linus already knew what to do. He lifted his hand slowly and began clicking his tongue against the roof of his mouth. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. The same rhythm he'd learned in mobility training to help him navigate spaces. The pattern that helped him understand the world around him. The charging footfalls stopped abruptly. Where people expected snarling and violence, there was silence. Linus felt warm breath against his hand, then the gentle press of a large head against his knee. The mighty police dog that everyone feared had transformed into something entirely different. "Oh my God, are you getting this?" Someone in the crowd whispered. The subtle sounds of phone cameras clicking filled the air as bystanders recorded the impossible scene. A blind boy and the state's most dangerous K9 sharing a peaceful moment. James finally reached them, his boots pounding against the pavement. "Get away from him!" he shouted, but his voice cracked with fear rather than anger. The dog's handler, still gripping the broken lead, approached cautiously. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, wonder and confusion mixing in his voice. He's never been this calm with anyone. Within minutes, the videos began spreading online. Comments exploded across social media, some calling for Havoc to be put down immediately, others defending the dog and pointing to the remarkable interaction with Linus as proof that he wasn't inherently dangerous. Greer Whitcomb watched one of these videos in her office less than an hour later. Her green eyes narrowed in concentration. As a K9 behaviorist, she'd seen countless cases of aggressive police dogs, but this was different. She replayed the video, paying close attention to the moment Havoc transformed from charging predator to gentle giant. "There's something we're missing," she murmured, noting how the dog's posture changed the instant Linus began his rhythmic clicking. Her phone rang, the police department requesting her immediate assessment of the situation. At the courthouse, James Knox paced in front of the precinct captain, his hands clenched into fists. "That dog is a menace," he shouted, pointing toward where Havoc was now safely contained. "He could have killed my nephew. I want him put down. Today." "Mr. Knox," The captain tried to calm him. "We need to follow proper procedures. We've called in our best behaviorist to evaluate." "Evaluate what?" James's voice cracked with emotion. "That animal broke free and charged a blind child. What else do you need to know?" Greer arrived at this moment, her practical boots clicking against the floor as she approached. She caught the tail end of James's argument and took a deep breath, knowing this wouldn't be easy. Years of experience had taught her that fear and protective instincts were often the biggest obstacles in cases like this. "Mr. Knox," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I'm Greer Whitcomb. I understand your concern, but there's something unusual about what happened here today. Your nephew did something remarkable." James turned to her, his face flushed with anger. "The only thing remarkable is that he wasn't torn apart by that monster." Linus, who had been sitting quietly nearby, spoke up. "He's not a monster, Uncle James." His voice was soft but clear. "He was scared. I could hear it in his breathing." Greer's attention shifted to the boy, intrigued by his insight. "Can you tell me more about that, Linus? About what you heard?" "It was like when I first lost my sight," Linus explained, his clouded blue-gray eyes directed toward her voice. "When everything feels too big and loud, and you just want to run. But then you find a pattern, something to hold on to, and it helps you feel safe again." The simplicity and wisdom of his words hung in the air. Greer noticed James's posture soften slightly, though concern still etched deep lines around his eyes. "That's why I used my clicking," Linus continued. "It's what helps me when I'm scared. I thought maybe it would help him too." Greer knelt beside Linus's chair, her voice gentle but serious. "You might have uncovered something very important. Sometimes dogs that appear aggressive are actually responding to triggers we can't see, or in this case, maybe triggers we can't hear." James stepped forward protectively. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to investigate this further before making any decisions about Havoc's fate," Greer replied, standing to meet James's gaze. "Your nephew may have just shown us that there's more to this dog's behavior than anyone realized." The tension between them was palpable, Greer's measured analysis clashing with James's raw fear for his nephew's safety. But beneath their opposition, a reluctant connection formed, bound by the extraordinary event they'd witnessed and the boy who made it possible. Outside, the crowd had grown as more people gathered to share what they'd seen and debate Havoc's fate. The story was spreading rapidly online, with hashtags trending and opinions dividing sharply between those calling for immediate action and those advocating for a deeper investigation. Through it all, Linus sat quietly, his fingers running over the notches he'd carved in his walking cane. He could hear the fear in his uncle's voice, the curiosity in Greer's questions, and somewhere in the building, the steady breathing of a dog who, like him, just needed someone to understand his language of survival. The fluorescent lights of the police precinct's K9 unit cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor as Greer Whitcomb made her way down the corridor. The sharp smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of wet dog and anxiety that seemed to permeate the air. Lieutenant Royce Delmore met her at the kennels, his pristine uniform and rigid posture a stark contrast to the controlled chaos around them. His steely gray eyes sized her up with calculated precision. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said, his tone clipped, "I've reviewed your credentials. While impressive, I believe this investigation is unnecessary. The courthouse incident was clearly handler error." Greer maintained steady eye contact. "With respect, Lieutenant, a dog with Havoc's training doesn't simply break free. I'd like to observe him myself." Delmore's jaw tightened. "Very well, though I warn you, he's been agitated since the incident." They approached Havoc's kennel, and Greer immediately noticed how the large German shepherd pressed himself against the back wall, His amber eyes darted between them, muscles tense beneath his black coat. "See, aggressive," Delmore stated flatly. But Greer saw something entirely different. Havoc's ears were pulled back, his tail tucked, classic signs of fear, not aggression. She knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. "This isn't an aggressive dog, Lieutenant. This is a terrified one." Delmore scoffed. "You're seeing what you want to see. Havoc will remain contained until further notice. We can't risk another incident." As they left the kennels, Greer noticed how Havoc's posture changed when Delmore walked away. The dog's muscles relaxed slightly, though the fear remained in his eyes. Later that afternoon, Greer pulled into the driveway of James Knox's modest suburban home. The auto repair shop he owned was visible behind the house, tools and parts organized with mechanical precision. James met her at the door before she could knock, his expression guarded. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I need to talk to Linus about what happened," Greer explained. "His insight could help prevent future incidents." James crossed his arms. "You mean help that dangerous animal avoid consequences?" "Uncle James?" Linus appeared behind him, his walking cane tapping gently against the doorframe. "Is that Miss Whitcomb?" "Yes, but she was just leaving." "Please," Linus interrupted softly. "I want to help." James's shoulders slumped in resignation, and he stepped aside to let Greer enter. The living room was warm and lived in, with well-worn furniture and family photos covering the walls. Linus settled into his favorite armchair, his fingers automatically finding the carved notches in his cane. "Can you tell me more about what you heard when Havoc approached you?" Greer asked, sitting across from him. "There was something else," Linus said thoughtfully. "Before he ran at me. A sort of high-pitched sound, but really faint. Like when you tune an old radio." Greer leaned forward, interest piqued. "When exactly did you hear this sound?" "Just before everyone started screaming. It was quick, but it made my ears hurt a little." James stepped between them. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're trying to find excuses for that dog instead of accepting the truth. He's dangerous and needs to be put down before he hurts someone else." "Mr. Knox," Greer began, but was interrupted by her phone buzzing urgently. The news alert made her blood run cold. "Local store owner mauled in late-night attack. Police K9 suspected." She rushed to the precinct, her mind racing. Lieutenant Delmore was already giving a press conference when she arrived. "The attack bears all the hallmarks of K9 Havoc," Delmore announced to the gathered reporters. "The victim's wounds match his bite pattern, and security footage shows a large, dark-colored dog fleeing the scene." Something didn't add up. Greer slipped away from the crowd and made her way to the evidence room. Years of working with police departments had taught her the system, and she quickly accessed the digital archives. The body cam footage from both incidents should have been automatically uploaded. She found the courthouse footage first, scanning through the timestamps. There it was, a 4-minute gap just before Havoc broke free. She checked the convenience store footage next and found another gap, this one 3 minutes long, right before the attack. Her hands shook slightly as she downloaded the files to her tablet. This wasn't handler error or an aggressive dog. This was something far more deliberate. Someone had deleted crucial moments from both recordings, and she had a sinking feeling about who might be responsible. A shadow fell across her screen, and she quickly closed the files. Officer Chen, one of the younger K9 handlers, stood in the doorway looking nervous. "Ms. Whitcomb, Lieutenant Delmore wants to see you in his office. He says it's about restricting your access to Havoc." Greer nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite her racing heart. She had what she needed, proof that something was very wrong within the K9 unit. Now she just had to figure out what was happening during those missing minutes, and why someone wanted those moments erased from record. As she walked to Delmore's office, she couldn't shake the image of Havoc pressed against his kennel wall. Not with aggression, but with the unmistakable posture of an animal who had learned to fear his own handlers. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and they were willing to destroy both human and animal lives to keep their secrets hidden. Greer knew she needed another conversation with Linus, this time without James's protective hovering. She called ahead, explaining her theory about sound triggers, and to her surprise, James agreed to a meeting, though his reluctance was clear in every word. The following morning, she sat with Linus in their sunlit living room. James watched from the doorway, arms crossed, while Linus settled into his familiar armchair. "I'd like to try something," Greer said, pulling out her tablet. "Can you describe exactly what you heard before Havoc approached you at the courthouse?" Linus's fingers traced the notches on his cane thoughtfully. "It was strange. Like a whistle, but not quite. Really high and sharp. Most people were too busy talking to notice, I think. But I'm used to listening for different sounds to help me know where things are." Greer nodded, typing notes. "When exactly did you hear it?" "Just before everyone started screaming. Maybe 3 or 4 seconds before Havoc moved." Linus tilted his head. "It reminded me of those electronic pest repellers our neighbors used to have. The ones that were supposed to keep mice away?" That detail made Greer sit up straighter. She pulled up the salvaged body cam footage on her tablet, the section just before the gap. Playing it at different speeds and frequencies, she finally isolated something, a brief, high-pitched tone that most human ears wouldn't catch. "There." Linus pointed toward the tablet. "That's it. That's what I heard." James pushed off from the doorway. "What are you talking about? I don't hear anything." "It's ultrasonic," Greer explained, excitement building in her voice. "Most adults can't hear frequencies that high, but children sometimes can. And dogs definitely can." She turned to Linus. "You have an extraordinary gift for sound recognition." "But what does it mean?" James asked, his skepticism wavering slightly. "It means Havoc isn't just randomly attacking. Someone's triggering him with that sound." Greer looked at her tablet screen grimly. "And they're doing it on purpose." Linus gripped his cane tighter. "He's being hurt, isn't he? That's why he seems so scared." "I think so," Greer said softly. "And I think you might be able to help him." James immediately shook his head. "Absolutely not. I'm not letting Linus anywhere near that dog again." "Uncle James," Linus spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Remember when I first went blind? How scared I was of everything. But you helped me learn to trust my other senses, to find my way around differently." He turned his face toward his uncle. "Havoc's scared too. He needs someone to help him find a different way." The room fell silent. James looked at his nephew, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he sighed heavily. "You're not going alone." An hour later, they stood at the K9 training lot behind the precinct. Havoc was tethered to a sturdy post, handlers keeping their distance. The German shepherd's posture was rigid, eyes darting between the humans surrounding him. Greer guided Linus forward carefully, James hovering close behind them. "Remember," she whispered to Linus, "just like before, nice and calm." Linus nodded and began clicking his tongue in that same gentle rhythm he'd used at the courthouse. The change in Havoc was immediate and stunning. The dog's ears pricked forward, his muscles relaxing visibly. Another few clicks, and Havoc lowered himself to the ground, inching forward until his head rested near Linus's feet. "Good boy," Linus murmured, reaching down slowly. His fingers found Havoc's ear, and the dog leaned into the touch with a soft whine. "Impossible," one of the handlers muttered. Greer watched in amazement. This wasn't just a trained police dog responding to commands. This was an animal recognizing safety, choosing trust over fear. Her theory about the ultrasonic trigger grew stronger. Someone had conditioned Havoc to respond violently to specific sounds, but they hadn't counted on a blind boy with exceptional hearing to discover their method. "What's going on here?" Lieutenant Delmore's sharp voice cut through the moment. He strode across the training lot, uniform pristine despite the dusty environment. "This area is restricted to authorized personnel only." "I authorize their presence," Greer stated firmly. "We're conducting a behavioral assessment." Delmore's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Havoc calm and gentle under Linus's touch, completely contrary to the dangerous animal narrative he'd been pushing. "Assessment's over. Get them out of here." "But sir," Greer began. "That's an order, Ms. Whitcomb. Or should we discuss the terms of your consulting contract?" The threat was clear in his voice. James must have heard it too, because he quickly moved forward to guide Linus away. The boy's hand lingered on Havoc's head for a moment longer. "It's okay," Linus whispered to the dog. "We'll figure this out." As they left the training lot, Greer watched Havoc's posture change, tension returning to his frame as Linus's presence faded. But now she had proof, both of the ultrasonic trigger and of Havoc's true nature. The dog wasn't a mindless attacker. He was a victim of carefully orchestrated violence. The question was, who was orchestrating it, and why? After leaving the K9 training lot, Greer couldn't shake the image of Delmore's calculated anger when he saw Havoc responding to Linus. She'd seen that kind of reaction before, not from someone concerned about safety, but from someone protecting a secret. In her small home office, surrounded by dog training certificates and behavior analysis texts, Greer began digging through old case files. Her laptop screen glowed as she searched through public records, police reports, and news articles about the K9 unit under Delmore's command. "This can't be a coincidence," she muttered, scribbling notes. A pattern emerged. Every major drug bust or asset seizure involving Delmore's K9 teams included reports of aggressive dog behavior. Property owners would suddenly sign over assets, witnesses would recant statements, and cases would close quickly. Too quickly. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Ms. Whitcomb?" A woman's voice spoke quietly. "This is Sergeant Maeve Rudd from Internal Affairs. We need to talk." They met at a small coffee shop, far from the precinct. Sergeant Rudd looked exactly like what Greer expected from an Internal Affairs officer. Sharp-eyed, weathered, and cautious. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. "I've been watching Delmore for months," Rudd explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every complaint file about his K9 unit crosses my desk. Then it crosses his desk. Then it vanishes." Greer leaned forward. "Vanishes?" "Completely. Digital records deleted, paper copies shredded. And the complainants? They suddenly remember things differently." Rudd's tired eyes met Greer's. "Or they move away. Or their businesses get shut down for code violations." "He's using the dogs to intimidate people," Greer said, her suspicions confirmed. "But how is he controlling them so precisely?" "That's where your blind boy comes in, doesn't it?" Rudd raised an eyebrow. "Word is he heard something nobody else could." Greer nodded slowly. "We need to prove it. Not just theory, hard evidence." "Be careful," Rudd warned. "Delmore's got friends in high places. One wrong move, and you'll be the one who vanishes." Back at James's auto shop, Greer laid out her findings. James wiped his greasy hands on a rag, frowning as she explained what she'd discovered. "So this guy's been using police dogs to shake people down?" James's voice was thick with disgust. "And nobody stopped him?" "Nobody could prove it," Greer replied. "Until now." She turned to Linus, who sat perched on a workbench, listening intently. "But we need your help." James immediately stiffened. "No way! You're not using my nephew as bait." "Uncle James," Linus spoke up. "I want to help. Havoc isn't the only dog being hurt by this. There are probably others." "We'll do it safely," Greer assured them. "Controlled environment, bite suit, everything by the book. Sergeant Rudd will monitor the whole thing." It took more convincing, but James finally agreed, with conditions. The test would happen in a secured training pen, with multiple exits and safety protocols in place. Linus would wear a full bite suit, despite his protests that Havoc wouldn't hurt him. The next morning, they gathered at a private training facility Greer often used for rehabilitation cases. Sergeant Rudd set up monitoring equipment while Greer helped Linus into the padded bite suit. "It's so bulky," Linus complained, shuffling around to get used to the weight. "Safety first," James called from his position by the gate. His knuckles were white where he gripped the fence. Havoc arrived with his handler, a rookie officer who seemed nervous about the whole situation. Greer had arranged it through official channels as a behavioral assessment, making sure Delmore wouldn't be present. "Okay," Rudd announced from her monitoring station. "We're recording all frequencies, from subsonic to ultrasonic. If there's a trigger sound, we'll catch it." Greer positioned herself between Havoc and Linus. "Start with normal radio chatter," she instructed the handler. The officer clicked his radio, running through standard codes and calls. Havoc remained calm, occasionally glancing at Linus with interest. Then the officer switched channels. The change was instant. Havoc's ears flattened, his hackles rose, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Linus's head snapped up. "There," he called out. "That's the sound." Rudd's equipment spiked. "Got it. Ultrasonic frequency, just like you thought. It's coming from the radio itself." "Switch channels again," Greer ordered. The officer complied, and Havoc immediately relaxed. They repeated the test 3 more times, switching between normal channels and the modified one. Each time, the pattern was the same. The hidden frequency triggered Havoc's aggressive response, and removing it returned him to normal. "This is how he's doing it," Greer explained, recording everything on her phone. "Delmore modified certain radios to emit that specific frequency. When he wants Havoc to attack, he just needs to switch channels." "But why can't other people hear it?" James asked, finally moving away from the fence as he saw Havoc staying calm. "Most adults lose the ability to hear very high frequencies as they age," Greer explained. "Dogs can hear it clearly, and some children too. Linus's blindness probably enhanced his auditory sensitivity even further." "It hurts him," Linus said softly, walking toward Havoc in his cumbersome bite suit. "The sound, it hurts his ears. That's why he attacks. He wants it to stop." Havoc watched Linus approach, his tail giving a tentative wag. When Linus began his gentle clicking, the dog's entire demeanor softened. "This is definitely enough for a warrant," Rudd said, reviewing her data. "The frequency pattern matches across all tests. No way this is accidental interference." "We've got the mechanism," Greer agreed. "Now we just need to prove Delmore's the one using it." "And fast," Rudd added grimly. "Before he realizes we know." They carefully packed up the equipment, making sure to document everything properly. Greer watched as Linus said goodbye to Havoc, the boy's hand gentle on the dog's head. "We'll make it right," Linus promised the shepherd. "No more hurting." Havoc leaned into the touch, and Greer saw James's expression soften slightly. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't a vicious animal, but a victim of sophisticated abuse. Delmore had turned loyal police dogs into weapons, using pain and fear to control them. As they left the training facility, Greer felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. They had proof of the method, but Delmore was still in power. And if he discovered what they'd found, there was no telling how he'd react. but watching Linus walk confidently beside his uncle, she knew they couldn't back down now. Sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't a dog's bite. It was the truth about the hand holding the leash. The video hit social media like a thunderbolt. Greer stared at her phone screen in horror as the footage played. Cleverly edited clips from their controlled test showing Linus in the bite suit, but with all context and safety measures removed. The audio had been stripped, replaced with dramatic music that made everything seem reckless and dangerous. Local canine behaviorist endangers blind child for training footage, the caption read. Comments flooded in, each one more vicious than the last. What kind of monster uses a disabled kid as bait? She should be arrested. That poor boy. Where were his guardians? Her phone buzzed, James calling. She answered before the first ring ended. Have you seen it? His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Yes, James, you know that's not what happened. We had every safety measure in place. Sergeant Rudd was there. They're outside my shop right now, he cut her off. Health inspectors, building code enforcement, even the fire marshal. They're shutting me down over violations that didn't exist yesterday. Greer's stomach dropped. Delmore. You think? James's bitter laugh held no humor. This is what happens when you poke the bear, Greer. And now Linus, his voice caught. What about Linus? He called from school. Someone's been following him. A black SUV, tinted windows, just watching. Greer gripped her phone tighter, anger burning through her fear. Get him home. I'll meet you there. She grabbed her keys, but her phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert that made her blood run cold. Dangerous canine to be euthanized following public safety concerns. The article was brief, but devastating. Lieutenant Delmore, citing overwhelming public demand and clear evidence of unstable behavior, had scheduled Havoc's immediate euthanasia. The procedure would happen within 24 hours. Greer's hands shook as she dialed Sergeant Rudd. Maeve, they're going to kill him. We need that evidence now. Meet me at Carson's Diner in 30 minutes, Rudd replied in a clipped tone. Come alone. The diner was nearly empty when Greer arrived. Rudd sat in a back booth, civilian clothes making her almost unrecognizable. She didn't touch her coffee. Delmore's smarter than we thought, Rudd said without preamble. He keeps nothing incriminating at the precinct, but... She slid a small notepad across the table. He has a private storage facility. Security footage shows him making weekly visits, always carrying files. Greer studied the address. You think that's where he keeps the real records? Along with the modified radio equipment, training logs, probably financial records too. Everything we need to prove what he's doing. Rudd's eyes were hard. But we can't touch it, not officially. One whiff of a warrant and those files disappear forever. So we go unofficial. Greer's mind was already racing through possibilities. That's a career ender, maybe worse. Rudd's warning was clear. And not just for us. Anyone involved. Greer thought of James's shop, of Linus being followed. They were already paying the price. I need to talk to James. She found him and Linus at home, all the blinds drawn. James paced while Linus sat quietly on the couch, his fingers moving restlessly over his carved walking stick. They're going to kill Havoc, Linus said before Greer could speak. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. We can't let them. We won't. Greer laid out Rudd's information, watching James's face darken with each detail. So we break in, he said when she finished. Just walk right into a police lieutenant's private storage and steal his files. Not steal. Copy, Greer corrected. Everything goes back exactly as we found it. He can't know we were there until it's too late. And if we're caught, then I take the fall. You were never there. James ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "This is crazy. We should go to the media, tell them the truth about the video." "They won't believe us," Linus interrupted. His unseeing eyes seemed to find each of them in turn. "Not without proof. And Havoc will die while we try to convince them." Silence filled the room. Greer watched James struggle with himself, saw the moment his resistance crumbled. "I know someone," he said finally. "Used to do security work. He can get us the door codes, maybe disable the cameras for a few minutes. But Greer..." He met her eyes. "I still don't trust that dog. What we're risking here, it has to be worth it." "It is." Greer thought of Havoc's gentle submission to Linus's touch, the fear in his eyes when the ultrasonic signal hit. "This isn't just about one dog. It's about stopping someone who turns loyalty into a weapon, who hurts animals and people because he thinks power means never having to answer for anything." James nodded slowly. "When?" "Tonight. They're moving Havoc to the vet first thing tomorrow morning." Greer checked her watch. "We have 8 hours to find what we need." "I'm coming too," Linus announced. "Absolutely not," James and Greer said simultaneously. "I can hear things you can't," Linus insisted. "What if there are more signals, more triggers? You need me." "What we need is for you to be safe," James said firmly. "You'll stay with Mrs. Chen next door. No arguments." Linus's jaw set stubbornly, but he didn't protest further. Greer suspected he understood more than he let on, about the danger, about what they were risking. They spent the next few hours planning. James's contact came through with the codes and security details. Rudd provided the facility's layout and Delmore's usual schedule. Everything had to be perfect. As dusk settled, Greer watched James check his tools one last time. The fear was still there in his movements, but something else too. Determination. Maybe even hope. They were past the point of safe choices. Now there was only forward, into whatever darkness waited. Delmore had tried to bury the truth under fear and false evidence. He'd attacked their reputations, their livelihoods, even their sense of safety. But he'd miscalculated. Sometimes the worst thing you could do to good people was give them nothing left to lose. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across James's driveway as Greer pulled up in her truck. Havoc sat quietly in the back seat, his amber eyes alert but calm. She took a deep breath before stepping out. This wouldn't be an easy conversation. James was already at his front door, arms crossed. "No, absolutely not." "Listen to me first," Greer said, keeping her voice steady. "Tonight's going to be dangerous. Delmore's got eyes everywhere, and Linus will be vulnerable while we're gone. Which is exactly why that dog isn't coming anywhere near him." James's jaw clenched. "Mrs. Chen will watch him. That's the plan." "Mrs. Chen is 73 years old. If someone comes looking..." Greer let the words hang there. "Havoc's trained to protect, and he responds to Linus in a way I've never seen before." The screen door creaked open, and Linus stepped out onto the porch. His head tilted, catching the sound of their voices. "Is Havoc here?" Before James could object, Linus was already making his way down the steps, his walking stick tapping a gentle rhythm. Havoc's ears perked up at the sound. "Stay," Greer commanded softly, opening the truck's back door. Havoc remained seated, though his entire body seemed to lean toward the boy. Linus approached slowly, confidence in every step. When he reached the truck, his free hand found Havoc's muzzle with surprising accuracy. The large shepherd didn't move, didn't even breathe, as Linus's fingers traced the scars there. "We choose who we belong to," Linus said quietly. It wasn't clear if he was speaking to Havoc, to James, or to some truth only he could sense. James watched the interaction, his expression torn between ingrained fear and something newer. Wonder, perhaps. Linus. He won't hurt me, Uncle James. Linus's voice carried absolute certainty. He knows what it's like to be controlled, to have someone else decide what you are. Greer saw the impact of those words on James's face. He'd spent years protecting Linus from a world that often saw only his blindness. Now his nephew was showing him a different kind of sight. If anything happens, James began. I'll hear them coming, Linus said, and Havoc will stop them. The tension in James's shoulders slowly eased. He looked at Greer, and she saw the decision in his eyes before he spoke. How do we do this? They spent the next hour preparing. Greer worked with Linus and Havoc in the backyard, establishing basic commands and responses. The dog's transformation was remarkable. Gone was the rigid military bearing, replaced by an attentive gentleness that matched Linus's calm energy. James watched from the porch, his expression softening by degrees. When Linus demonstrated how Havoc would now lie down at a specific pattern of tongue clicks, a hint of a smile crossed James's face. Inside, they reviewed the storage facility's layout one more time. James spread the blueprints across the kitchen table while Linus sat nearby, Havoc's head resting against his leg. The main office is here, James pointed. Security cameras cover these angles, but Danny's loop should give us 12 minutes of clear footage. Enough time to copy the files, not enough to search if we guess wrong. Greer studied the building's dimensions. Delmore's unit has to be on this end. It's the only one with separate climate control. For preserving documents, James nodded. Smart. Their eyes met across the table, and Greer felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. James's dedication to Linus had first struck her as overprotective, but she'd come to understand it was something deeper, a fierce love that shaped every choice he made. Seeing him now, willing to risk everything to expose the truth, only strengthened her growing feelings. The moment stretched between them until Linus shifted in his chair. You should take these, he said, pulling something from his pocket. It was a pair of small carved wooden figures, a dog and what looked like a guardian angel. I made them last week, he explained, placing them in Greer's hand. For luck? Greer closed her fingers around the warm wood, touched by the gesture. They're beautiful, Linus. James cleared his throat, clearly affected, but trying to stay focused. We should go over the signals again. If you hear anything suspicious, 3 short clicks for warning, 4 long ones for danger, Linus recited. And Havoc knows what to do. As if confirming this, Havoc pressed closer to the boy's side. The dog's posture was relaxed but alert, already settling into his role as protector. They spent another hour running through contingencies and backup plans. James called Mrs. Chen to tell her they'd made other arrangements. Greer checked and rechecked their equipment: flashlights, gloves, the specialized phone that would copy Delmore's files. As evening approached, the gravity of what they were about to do settled over them. James pulled Linus into a tight hug, holding on a moment longer than usual. You call the police the second anything feels wrong, understand? We'll be fine, Linus assured him. Just be careful. Greer watched them, struck by the trust being placed in her, not just with their safety, but with their hearts. Somehow, in the midst of this crisis, they'd become more than allies. They'd become family. James straightened up, meeting her eyes with a mix of determination and something warmer. Ready? She nodded, patting her pocket where Linus's carved figures rested. Ready. They did one final check of the house's security system. Havoc lay at attention by Linus's feet, his presence both reassuring and symbolic of how far they'd come. What had started as fear and suspicion had transformed into an unshakable bond, between boy and dog, between protector and protected, between people who'd chosen to believe in each other despite every reason not to. As they prepared to leave, Greer looked back at Linus sitting calmly in his favorite chair, Havoc a steadfast guardian beside him. The sight filled her with a fierce determination. They weren't just fighting to save one dog or expose one corrupt officer. They were fighting for something larger, the right to choose who we trust, who we protect, who we become. Tonight would change everything. But looking at James's quiet strength and Linus's unwavering faith, Greer knew they were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The storage facility loomed dark against the night sky, its metal walls gleaming under security lights. Greer's hand brushed against the wooden figures in her pocket as she and James approached Unit 312. The lock yielded easily to James's practiced touch. Too easily. "Something's wrong," James whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "This was picked recently." Greer nodded, every instinct screaming caution, but they couldn't turn back, not when they were so close. She pulled out her phone, ready to capture whatever evidence they found. Inside, the unit was larger than expected, lined with filing cabinets and computer equipment. The air felt thick, stale. James moved straight to a rack of external hard drives while Greer began photographing documents. "Got something?" James muttered, connecting a drive to their specialized copying device. Multiple video files, all from dates matching the attacks. Greer leaned in, scanning file names. "These were deliberately corrupted. Look at the timestamps. They match exactly when Havoc supposedly went berserk." The first file began transferring. James kept watch while Greer dug deeper into the cabinets. Incident reports, personnel files, financial records, all carefully organized and damning. She photographed everything, hands trembling with a mix of triumph and dread. A faint hiss made her pause. At first, she thought it was static from the equipment. Then her eyes began to water. "Gas!" James yanked his shirt over his nose. "It's coming through the vents." Tear gas filled the unit with shocking speed. Greer's throat burned as she scrambled to disconnect their device. Through streaming eyes, she saw James struggling with the door. It had somehow sealed shut behind them. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, barely audible but unmistakable. The ultrasonic whistle. Which meant, "Delmore knows we're here," Greer choked out. "He's trying to trigger Havoc." Back at the house, Linus sat bolt upright as the sound reached his sensitive ears. Beside him, Havoc went rigid, muscles trembling. The dog's gentle demeanor vanished, replaced by programmed aggression. "No," Linus whispered, hearing the change in Havoc's breathing. He could picture the dog's internal battle, loyalty versus conditioning, trust versus terror. Without hesitation, Linus began clicking his tongue in the pattern that had first calmed Havoc at the courthouse. Click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. Havoc whined, torn between two commands. His body shook with the effort to resist the whistle's pull. Linus kept clicking, steady and sure, offering an anchor against the pain. In the storage unit, the gas grew thicker. James slammed his shoulder against the door again and again, but it wouldn't budge. Greer's phone slipped from numbed fingers as she fought to breathe. A sharp crack split the air, followed by orange light. A flare had ignited in the corner, whether by accident or design. Smoke joined the gas, turning the unit into a death trap. "James!" Greer stumbled toward him, barely able to see. Their fingers found each other in the chaos, holding tight. The whistle's pitch changed, rising to a painful screech. Miles away, Havoc howled, but Linus didn't stop clicking. He poured all his faith into the rhythm, trusting it would reach through the dog's programming. Click, click. Pause. Click, click, Click. Something shifted in Havoc's stance. The tension drained from his muscles, replaced by purposeful calm. Without warning, he bolted for the door, shouldering it open with desperate strength. "Wait," Linus called, but Havoc was already gone, following some deeper instinct than either whistle or clicking could command. The fire spread quickly across the unit's ceiling. James and Greer huddled low, gasping in the smoky air. The heat grew unbearable as flames consumed boxes of files, years of evidence disappearing into ash. A thunderous crash shook the door. Another followed. And suddenly Havoc burst through the weakened metal, fur bristling but eyes clear. He grabbed Greer's sleeve in powerful jaws, tugging her toward the opening. "James," she coughed, refusing to let go of his hand. "Go!" He pushed her forward, following close behind as Havoc led them through the smoke. They stumbled into the night air just as the unit's roof collapsed. The fire roared behind them, destroying everything they'd found. But they were alive, thanks to a dog who'd chosen trust over training, love over fear. Havoc pressed against their legs, trembling but steady. The whistle still sounded in the distance, but it held no power over him now. He had made his choice. Greer touched the wooden figures in her pocket, the dog and the angel, carved by a boy who understood more about loyalty than any training manual could teach. They had survived Delmore's trap, but more importantly, they had proven what Linus knew all along. True bonds can't be broken by force or fear. James helped her to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm. "We need to get back," he said hoarsely. "Make sure Linus is safe." Greer nodded, watching Havoc's alert posture. The dog was already turning toward home, drawn by the same invisible thread that had brought him here, the trust of a child who never doubted him. Together, they disappeared into the shadows, leaving the burning evidence behind. They had lost their proof, but gained something far more valuable: the unshakable certainty that they were fighting for something real, something pure, something worth any risk to protect. The river rushed dark and swift beneath the moonlight. Greer, James, and Havoc moved quietly through the shadows, hoping to reach safety after their narrow escape from the burning storage unit. The night air still carried traces of smoke in the wind. A figure stepped out from behind a tree. Lieutenant Delmore's uniform gleamed as he dragged a struggling Linus into view. "Let him go!" James's voice cracked with fury and fear. Delmore's grip tightened around Linus's arm as he pulled the boy closer to the riverbank. "Make one move, and we'll see how well the kid swims." His other hand held a small black device, the ultrasonic transmitter. Havoc's ears flattened against his skull. His muscles quivered as Delmore's thumb hovered over the trigger. "You really thought you could turn my own weapon against me?" Delmore's laugh was cold. "Let's see where his loyalty truly lies." He pressed the button. The high-pitched frequency pierced the air, invisible to most, but Linus winced at its painful clarity. Havoc whined, his body going rigid with programmed response. "Attack!" Delmore commanded, pointing at Greer. But Linus, even in Delmore's grasp, began his steady clicking. Click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. The pattern that had first broken through Havoc's conditioning floated across the space between them. Havoc's head swung between Delmore and Linus, caught between two opposing forces. His training demanded violence, but the boy's rhythm spoke to something deeper, trust freely given, not forced. Greer took a step forward, hoping to reach Linus. The metallic click of a gun being cocked froze her in place. "Stay right there," Delmore warned, his service weapon now aimed at her chest. "I want to see this. Make him choose, boy. Your little clicks against years of professional training." Linus kept clicking, unwavering. His sightless eyes seemed to find havoc in the darkness. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're not his anymore." The ultrasonic pulse increased in intensity. Havoc's legs trembled, a low growl building in his throat. But he didn't move toward Greer. Instead, he inched closer to Linus, fighting against the programmed response with every step. Through tear-filled eyes, Greer caught movement behind Delmore. James had spotted something. Sergeant Maeve's patrol car, parked just beyond the trees. Its communication console glowed in the darkness, still active. Their stolen drive could broadcast everything, if they could just reach it. James met her gaze. She gave him the slightest nod, understanding passing between them. While Delmore focused on his twisted demonstration, James began edging away from the group. "Come on, dog," Delmore snarled, frustration breaking through his control. He yanked Linus closer to the river's edge, making the boy stumble. "Show them what you really are!" But Havoc's growl had changed direction. Step by step, he moved between Delmore and Linus. The transmitter's whine reached a fever pitch, but the dog's eyes never left the lieutenant's face. "You see?" Linus's voice was quiet but clear above the river's rush. "He chooses who he wants to be." James's heart pounded as he reached Maeve's patrol car. His hands shook as he plugged the stolen drive into the console. The screen flickered to life, displaying Maeve's recorded evidence, including the exact frequency of Delmore's control signal. With a silent prayer, he pressed the broadcast button. The signal went live across every police radio in range. The high-pitched whine erupted from dozens of patrol cars parked nearby, creating an overwhelming chorus of ultrasonic frequencies. The sound waves collided and amplified, turning Delmore's own weapon against him. The lieutenant's hand jerked, his transmitter crackling with interference. Sparks flew from the device as its circuits overloaded. Havoc's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. The dog's gaze locked onto the source of his torment, the small black transmitter in Delmore's grip. "No!" Delmore stumbled backward, dragging Linus dangerously close to the river's edge. Loose gravel shifted under their feet. Havoc lunged forward, powerful jaws clamping down on Delmore's sleeve. The dog pulled with controlled strength, trying to anchor the man without hurting Linus. But Delmore's backwards momentum was too strong. He teetered at the edge, his grip on Linus threatening to pull the boy over with him. Linus's cane clattered against the rocks as he lost his balance. Greer sprang into action. She dove forward, her fingers finding the familiar straps of Linus's safety harness. Her muscles strained as she gripped the sturdy material, becoming a human anchor against the pull of gravity. "Hold on!" she shouted, her voice raw with effort. James sprinted back from the patrol car, the heavy towing strap from his mechanic's kit uncoiling in his hands. With practiced speed, he looped the strap around a nearby tree trunk, then tossed the other end toward the struggling group. "Greer, catch!" She snatched the strap with her free hand, quickly wrapping it around her arm and Linus's harness. James braced himself against the tree and pulled, adding his strength to their lifeline. Havoc maintained his grip on Delmore, preventing the lieutenant from falling while keeping him from dragging Linus down. The dog's training, once used for violence, now served to save lives. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Red and blue lights painted the trees as squad cars converged on their location. The cavalry was coming. Delmore's shoulders slumped as the fight drained out of him. His transmitter slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering harmlessly among the rocks. The weapon that had given him so much power now lay broken and useless. Working together, James and Greer pulled everyone to solid ground. Linus immediately wrapped his arms around Havoc's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur. The German shepherd stood protectively over the boy, finally free to follow his true nature. The aftermath unfolded like a tidal wave through the police department. Sergeant Maeve Rudd personally delivered the evidence to Internal Affairs: boxes of falsified reports, deleted footage, and financial records that traced years of corruption. The data from the burned storage shed proved devastating, revealing how Delmore had systematically used K-9 units to intimidate witnesses and orchestrate illegal seizures. In the stark light of the precinct's largest conference room, Greer sat straight-backed as she testified. Her voice remained steady as she detailed the pattern of abuse, the weaponization of trained police dogs, and the manipulation of evidence. The review board listened intently, their faces growing grimmer with each revelation. "These animals were never the threat," she concluded, her green eyes fierce. "They were victims of a system that confused cruelty with control." The media coverage exploded. Local news stations ran special reports on "The Whistle of Control" and "The Boy Who Tamed Havoc." Linus handled the attention with quiet grace, always redirecting praise to the dog at his side. When reporters asked how he felt about being called a hero, he simply smiled and scratched behind Havoc's ears. "I just listened," he would say. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs. Someone to really listen." The police commissioner himself signed the papers that officially retired Havoc from service. The ceremony was small, held in the department's K-9 training yard, where everything had started. Havoc sat perfectly still as they removed his police vest for the last time, replacing it with a simple harness that marked him as Linus's companion. James watched from the sidelines, his earlier fears transformed into something like wonder. The sight of his nephew's hand resting confidently on Havoc's head spoke volumes about how wrong he'd been. The dog he'd once demanded be put down now slept at the foot of Linus's bed every night, a guardian transformed by trust. One crisp morning, James found Greer at his shop, leaning against her truck with 2 coffee cups in hand. She offered him one with a knowing smile. "Thought you might want to join us," she said. "Linus and Havoc's morning walk." They found boy and dog waiting by the riverside path, Havoc's tail wagging gently as they approached. The same spot where chaos had erupted just weeks ago now felt peaceful in the early light. "I've been thinking," Greer said as they walked, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. "Havoc's rehabilitation needs a fresh approach. Linus's clicking rhythm, it's not just calming him, it's giving him a new language, one built on trust instead of fear." James nodded, watching his nephew navigate the familiar path with confident steps, Havoc matching his pace perfectly. "You were right," he admitted, "about everything. I was so focused on protecting him that I couldn't see past my own fear." "Fear makes sense," Greer replied softly. "But look at them now." Ahead of them, Linus had stopped to show Havoc something, probably a new sound or texture he'd discovered. The massive German shepherd listened with tilted head, every bit as attentive as a scholar at lecture. "We'll work with that rhythm," Greer continued, her voice warm with purpose. "Build new associations, positive ones. It won't be quick, but healing rarely is." James felt something settle in his chest, a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing what we couldn't." The morning sun caught the river's surface, scattering light like diamonds across the water. Linus's laughter floated back to them as Havoc pressed his nose against the boy's palm, asking for more scratches. In that moment, standing on the path where everything had changed, James understood what true safety looked like. It wasn't walls or weapons or constant vigilance. It was this: trust freely given, faith rewarded, and love strong enough to overcome the darkest conditioning. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.